In this session, I will discuss working with the list data type. It's a data type that contains multiple values. Therefore, we can put a lot of data in a list. The purpose is to manage the sequential data in a structure so we can keep track of the data. If you're interested in more content, feel free to read the transcript on GitHub or download the source code. Also, like this video and subscribe to my channel. Plus, follow me on Twitter, connect with me on LinkedIn and Facebook. In the IDE, to create a list, we start with an opening and closing bracket. Each value, such as 5, 8, 2, 1, 7, 8, in the list is called an item or element that is separated by a comma. Since there are multiple items, normally we assign the values to a name that ends with an S, like numbers. We can create a collection of items that include numbers, true-false values that are Boolean, and letters like capital A, lowercase a, capital X, lowercase b. Also, it can include names like Jane, John, and James. If the values are related, it can also be a combination of numbers and letters. Python allows us to create a list within a list like Booleans, values that contain square brackets within the square brackets that are separated by a comma. First list item can be a 0, false. Second list can be 1, comma, error. Now, 1, comma, that'll be true, and next would be -1, and that can be error. To print, we pass in the name of the list, such as numbers. Print, how about letters, and also print Booleans. When I run, we see each value in the console for numbers, letters, and the Booleans. Now, we have a function that count the number of items in a list, or how many times an item appears in a list. And that is the len function, which means length. So if we want to see how many items are in a list, we place len before each list name. Len numbers, len letters, and len Booleans. Run, and the console returns 6, 7, and 3. Notice how the list within a list shows 3 and not 6. That's because each list is considered one value. However, the len function is different from the count method. The count method returns how many times a particular item is in a list. For example, if I erase these print statements and type print numbers, then dot count, and pass in the number 5, then run, we see 1 in the console. Therefore, the 1 in the console shows how many times 5 appears in the list. Now, if I change 5 to 8, we see 8 shows up twice. So now run, the console shows 2. To access each item in the list, we print numbers, then the square brackets, then pass in the location. Each item in the list has an index position that starts with 0. Therefore, the first item, which is 5, represents index 0. Inside the square brackets, when I write 0 and run, the console returns 5 because it is the first index, the first item, which is index 0. Now, I'm going to pass in another value, but when it comes to 0, we know it's the first index. We can also count backwards, count the last index, and count backwards, we can use a negative number. However, the indexes start at 1 when using an index number. Let's use a different list by changing numbers to letters. Then pass in -1. Then run, and the console shows James because it is the last item in the letters list. Accessing a particular item is different for a list within a list. If I replace letters with booleans, bingo, then run, we see one error in the console because it is also the last item. When I replace -1 with 0, this time when I run, watch what we see. 0, false, because it is the first item for index 0. To access an individual item in a list within a list, we need 2 sets of square brackets for the print statement. And to access that list, let me show you by adding a comment. And we already know that 0 and false is index 0. So for 0, I'm going to write 0, 0. For false, I'm going to write 0, 1. Index position 1 is 1 and true. Therefore, if I write 1, 0, that's for 1. And if I write 1, 1, that's for true. Moving on to the next item, it's the same. -1 is 2, 0. And error is 2, 1. So if I want to print true, I would add 1, 1 in the square brackets. Run, and the console shows true, which is 1, 1. Let's look at a couple of errors for the numbers list. We see there are 6 items. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if I print numbers, then pass in 6 and run, the console shows index error that says list index out of range. It's out of range because the index starts at 0 and the last index stops at 5. Another error for this here is the type error. But let me explain the index error right quick. Python searches this list and realizes there is no index 6. That's why it throws an index error, because it's out of range for 6. But we know that if I pass in 5, it'll be all good for the last number 8. Now, Python only allows integer values for the index position and not float values. Therefore, if I change 5 to 1.0 and run, the console shows type error and does not print the second value. The error says list indices must be integers or slices. Next, I will show you how to slice a list, also demo how to add items, remove items, and sort items in a list. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next session.